careful with your words, the world seemed to whisper. But for a black single dad with nothing left to lose, the only words that mattered were the ones he read to his daughter. The cold was a living thing in the small apartment above the faded page bookstore. It seeped through the window frames, a relentless thief stealing what little warmth a single space heater could offer. Elias drew the thin blanket tighter around his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. Her small body curled against his on the worn sofa. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the glass and driving sleet against the panes in a frantic, endless rhythm. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb overhead, a dying star in their shrinking universe. Its unsteady pulse mirrored the frantic beat of Elias's own heart. Below them, the bookstore, his legacy from his late wife, Sarah, was dark and silent. The hand-painted sign on the door, once a beacon of hope, was now obscured by a stark, professionally printed for lease sign that Mr. Gable, the building's owner, had hammered in himself just last week. Elias's hands, calloused from a lifetime of labor that had led to this precipice, trembled slightly as he held the book. It was Sarah's favorite, a collection of poems with a cover worn soft as flannel. He read in a low, steady voice, his words a small fire against the encroaching dark. He had nothing else to give Maya. The pantry held half a box of crackers and a single can of tomato soup. The final eviction notice sat on the kitchen counter, its sharp legal language a stark contrast to the gentle poetry in his hands. He was a good man, a quiet man who had paid his debts, worked hard, and loved fiercely. But the town of Northwood Creek had never fully seen him. It saw a black man running a failing business, a widower struggling to raise a child alone, an easy target. He had fought, but illness, a bad economy, and the town's quiet prejudice had been a tide too strong to swim against. Now the water was at his chin. Suddenly, a sharp, desperate rap echoed from the downstairs door, the one that led directly from the street into their apartment stairwell. It was a sound so out of place in the storm's symphony that both Elias and Maya flinched. Maya burrowed deeper into his side. "Who is it, Daddy?" she whispered, her voice a tiny thread of fear. Elias's mind raced. Couldn't be Gable, not at this hour, not in this weather. No one ever came to this door. He felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. Trouble, he thought. Trouble always finds a way. He gently moved Maya off his lap, pulling the blanket securely around her. "Stay here, sweet pea. I'll be right back." He descended the creaking stairs, each step a groan of protest from the old wood. The cold intensified with every foot he dropped, and he could feel the draft from the door even from halfway down. He peered through the small, distorted glass of the peephole. A figure stood hunched against the storm, gender and age obscured by the driving snow and the darkness. They looked like a wraith, a ghost spat out by the blizzard. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore the knock, to retreat back up the stairs to the fragile warmth of his daughter and the last few hours of peace they had left. He had nothing to offer. He had dangers of his own. But then the figure knocked again, a weaker, more pitiful sound this time, and Elias saw a hand, pale and trembling, brace against the doorframe. It was the hand of someone at their absolute limit. He thought of Sarah, of her unwavering belief in the goodness of people. He thought of what he wanted Maya to learn from him even now at the very end of their rope. With a deep breath that fogged in the frigid air of the stairwell, he turned the deadbolt and pulled the heavy door inward. The woman who stumbled inside was a portrait of misery. Her clothes, a simple jacket and jeans, were soaked through, plastered to her thin frame. Her dark hair was matted with ice, and her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue. She didn't look dangerous. She looked broken. She didn't meet his eyes, just stood shivering on the small welcome mat, dripping a puddle onto the worn floorboards. I'm sorry," she stammered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely form the words. "My car broke down, a few miles back. My phone is dead. I saw a light." Her gaze flickered upward, toward the faint glow from their apartment. His light, the one he was so sure was dying. Elias's heart ached. Here was another soul drowning in the same storm. He had so little, less than little, but he couldn't turn her away. "Come in," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Come up. Get out of the cold." He led her up the stairs, the woman moving with a weary, dragging gait. Maya peeked over the back of the sofa, her eyes wide with a child's unfiltered curiosity and fear. Elias gave her a small, reassuring nod. "It's okay, sweet pea. This is a traveler. She needs our help." He took the woman's wet jacket, hanging it on a hook where it dripped mournfully. Then he went to the kitchen and did the only thing he could think to do. He opened their last can of soup, added a little water to make it stretch, and heated it on the stove. He poured it into their two best bowls, one for Maya, one for their guest, and handed the woman a spoon. He and Maya would share the crackers later. The woman, who gave her name only as Anna, cradled the warm bowl in her hands as if it were a precious jewel. She ate slowly, deliberately, her gaze drifting around the small room. She looked at the shelves overflowing with books, the framed photo of a smiling, vibrant Sarah on the mantel, the crayon drawings Maya had taped to the wall. Her eyes, a startlingly clear shade of blue, seemed to see everything. The poverty, yes, but also the love that filled the spaces between the peeling paint and the worn furniture. She saw the dignity in their desperation. "Thank you," she said, her voice finally steady. The warmth of the soup had brought a little color back to her cheeks. "You didn't have to do this. It's just soup," Elias said, a lump forming in his throat. He felt a fool's shame for the meagerness of his offering. "No," she said, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was an intensity in her gaze that took him by surprise. "It's kindness. That's never just anything." She stayed the night on the sofa, wrapped in the blanket Elias had used. He and Maya curled together in his bed, the familiar weight of his daughter a comfort in the uncertain darkness. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside and the quiet, even breathing of the stranger in his living room. A strange sense of peace settling over him. He had done the right thing. Whatever came next, he had done the right thing. The morning brought a fragile, gray light and a temporary lull in the storm. It also brought Mr. Gable. His banging on the door was loud, arrogant, and insistent, a stark contrast to Anna's desperate knock the night before. Elias opened it to find his landlord standing there, his round face red from the cold and pinched with impatience. He was a man who fed on the misfortune of others, and Elias was his current feast. "Morning, Elias," Gable said, his voice slick with false congeniality. He pushed past him into the apartment, his wet boots leaving dirty tracks on the floor. "Just came to see if you've packed your library yet. Friday's the day, you know." His eyes landed on Anna, who was neatly folding the blanket on the sofa. A cruel, knowing smirk spread across his face. Well, got company? Didn't take you for the type to be running a charity. Or maybe it's not charity." He looked Elias up and down, his gaze dripping with racist insinuation. "You people are always so generous with what you don't have." Elias's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He felt a hot surge of rage, a desire to wipe the smirk off Gable's face. But he saw Maya peeking out from her bedroom door, her eyes wide with fear. He couldn't. He wouldn't. He forced himself to take a slow, steadying breath. "She was stranded in the storm," Elias said, his voice tight. "It was the decent thing to do." "Decency doesn't pay the rent," Gable sneered. He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial hiss. "I'm trying to help you, Elias. A word of advice from a man who knows how this town works. People are watching. You already have enough working against you. Careful with your words. Careful who you let in. Don't give them another reason to look down on you." The threat was clear, wrapped in the guise of friendly counsel. Don't make waves. Know your place. Elias felt sick. He had heard variations of that sentiment his entire life. "The rent is all that concerns you, Mr. Gable," Elias said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'll have it by Friday, or I'll be out. That was our agreement." Gable laughed, a short, barking sound. "Sure you will. See you Friday, He gave Anna another contemptuous look before turning and stomping back down the stairs, leaving a trail of filth and humiliation in his wake. After he was gone, the apartment felt colder than ever. Anna stood by the window, looking out at the snow-choked street. "He's a terrible man," she said softly. "He's just a man," Elias replied, his voice heavy with weariness. He didn't have the energy for hate. Anna turned from the window. "My car should be drivable now that the snow has let up a bit. I can call a tow truck from the gas station down the road." She hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her damp jacket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was old and smooth from years of handling. "This was my father's," she said, pressing it into his hand. "He said it always finds its way home. A reminder that kindness is a circle. It always comes back." Elias looked at the bird, then at her. He didn't know what to say. Felt like a strange, profound gesture. "Thank you for the soup," she said. "And the warmth. I won't forget it." And with that, she was gone, leaving Elias alone with the wooden bird, the eviction notice, and the rapidly approaching deadline. The next 2 days were a blur of quiet desperation. Elias called every person he knew, swallowed his pride, and asked for help. But his friends were struggling too, and the banks had long since written him off. He tried to sell some of the bookstore's rare first editions online, but there was no time. Hope dwindled with each passing hour, leaving a cold, hard certainty in its place. Friday arrived, not with the fury of the storm, but with a brittle, unforgiving cold. The sky was a pale, indifferent blue. It was over. He spent the morning packing. He and Maya moved with a somber, silent efficiency. They put clothes into worn suitcases and precious belongings into cardboard boxes. Elias carefully wrapped the photo of Sarah in a towel and placed it in a box labeled "Important." He found the wooden bird Anna had given him and slipped it into his pocket. Its smooth, polished surface was a small, tangible comfort. He was explaining to Maya that they were going on a little adventure when Gable's heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. This was it. Gable filled the doorway, a clipboard in his hand and a triumphant glint in his eye. "Well, Elias, time's up. Got the money." Elias stood up straight, pulling Maya behind him protectively. "No, Mr. Gable, I don't." "Shame," Gable said, with no shame at all. "Then I'll have to ask you to vacate the premises. Immediately. I've already got new tenants lined up." "Good. Respectable people." The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. As Gable took a step forward, ready to begin directing the eviction, the sound of a powerful engine cut through the quiet street. A sleek, black sedan, the kind of car that didn't belong in Northwood Creek, pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out. She wore a tailored wool coat, elegant leather boots, and carried a slim leather briefcase. It was Anna. She looked different, poised, confident, powerful, but her eyes were the same. She walked past the gaping Gable without a glance and stopped in front of Elias. Behind her, a man in a sharp suit followed, carrying a thicker, more imposing file. "Elias," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I told you I wouldn't forget." Gable sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Who the hell are you? This is a private matter." Anna finally turned to face him. The air in the room seemed to crackle. "My name," she said, her voice dropping to an icy calm, "is Anastasia Sterling. My father, Marcus Sterling, founded Sterling Enterprises, which, among many other things, acquired this entire block of properties 6 months ago, which makes me your boss. And you, Mr. Gable, are fired." The man in the suit stepped forward. He opened the file he was carrying. Everyone stood. Gable's jaw hung open. The tenants from the neighboring apartments, drawn by the commotion, had begun to gather in the hallway and on the street below, their faces pressed to windows. They were about to witness a reckoning. "Mr. Gable," the lawyer said, his tone clipped and professional. "This file contains a detailed record of your management. It includes dozens of tenant complaints of harassment, illegal rent hikes, and discriminatory practices. It also contains evidence of embezzlement. Sterling Enterprises has a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. Gable's face had gone from red to a pasty, sickly white. He looked from Anastasia to the lawyer to the file, and for the first time Elias saw true fear in the man's eyes. But Anastasia wasn't finished. She turned back to Elias, her expression softening. My father believed that a person's true character is revealed not by what they have, but by what they do when they have nothing. He would often travel, incognito, to see the world as it really was. I was honoring his memory when my car broke down in the storm. You, Elias, had every reason to turn me away. You were at your lowest point, yet you opened your door. You gave a stranger your last bit of food. She gestured for the lawyer, who pulled another document from the briefcase. It was a deed. Sterling Enterprises doesn't just want to own buildings, Anastasia continued, her voice ringing with authority and conviction. We want to build communities, and communities are built on people like you. She held the deed out to Elias. We are forgiving all your back rent. Furthermore, we are signing the deed to this bookstore and the apartment over to you. It's yours. No mortgage. No debt. A foundation for you and your daughter to build a new life. Elias stared at the paper, unable to comprehend. His hands, which had been trembling with despair only moments before, were now shaking with a disbelieving joy. He looked at Maya, whose face was a mask of awe. He looked at the crowd of his neighbors, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to a dawning, vicarious triumph. They were seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time, not as the struggling widower, but as a man whose quiet virtue had just moved a mountain. Gable was escorted out by security that had materialized from a second car. The crowd of onlookers broke into spontaneous, scattered applause. One by one, his neighbors came forward, patting his shoulder, congratulating him, sharing their own stories of Gable's cruelty. A wall of isolation that had surrounded Elias for years crumbled in a matter of minutes. In the weeks that followed, Northwood Creek began to change. Anastasia, true to her word, invested heavily in the community. She established a fund to help small businesses, renovated the dilapidated storefronts, and started a free after-school program for the town's children, headquartered in a newly refurbished community center. And at the heart of it all was Elias. He was appointed to the board of the new community fund, his quiet wisdom and deep-seated integrity now seen as invaluable assets. The for-lease sign came down, and with a new coat of paint and a grant from the fund, the faded page was reborn as the Sterling Page, a bright, warm, and welcoming place that quickly became the town's new heart. The small apartment upstairs was transformed, too. The old heater was replaced, the windows were sealed, and the pantry was always full. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was the presence of Anastasia. She became a regular visitor, then a fixture. She would help Maya with her homework, discuss book orders with Elias, and stay for dinner, her easy laughter filling the rooms that had once been silent with worry. A new family was being forged in the warmth of shared meals and mutual respect. Elias, Maya, and the woman who had arrived as a stranger in a storm. One evening, months later, the three of them sat around the dinner table. Snow was falling gently outside the new, draft-free windows, blanketing the town in a peaceful white. The light from the lamp overhead was steady and warm. Maya was chattering happily about her day at school, and Elias was watching her, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small wooden bird. He had tried to return it to Anastasia, but she had insisted he keep it. He looked at her, his heart full. You know, he said softly, that night when you came to my door, I had lost all hope. I thought my light was going out. Anastasia reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Your light was the only one on in the entire storm, Elias, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It wasn't dying. It was a beacon. He looked from her warm, sincere face to his happy, thriving daughter, and he finally understood. Kindness isn't an expense. It is the only true currency we possess. It is a seed planted in the coldest winter, a trust that, against all odds, it will find its way home and blossom into a spring you never thought you'd see again.